It's better to take ownership of your thoughts and desires than feeling regret later in your life.
On today's episode, we are featuring Dr. Jingning Ao, who is working on her second Ph.D. in strategy at the University of Pittsburgh. One of Jingning's life dreams is to visit outer space someday, perhaps through her research on strategic communication in space tourism and industrialization, while also making this dream come true for more space enthusiasts. Jingning also holds 3 certificates from Harvard Business School online. Still a 100% dog person, Jingning loves her recently adopted cat, Kip. Jingning lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and is ready for new adventures when she secures a tenure-track assistant professor position at a research university. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the exciting journey of Dr. Jingning Ao. Hi Jingning, how are you?
Hi, Alok. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm just excited to be able to finally go to India in 5 days and spend some time with my family. Yes. Right. Okay. Now, of course, we've been, friends for quite some time. I've seen your evolution over the years. You've been on my other podcasts. So I just thought that, okay, let me dive deep a little bit in your personality. That brings us on the Afflatus. So my first question to you is, why is research important, and what sparked your interest in pursuing research as a career path?
I actually appreciate that you recognize and acknowledge what I'm doing is on a career path. I have people commented on me as a career student, that being a student has been my career. But that person is right about one thing, is that being a researcher is to prepare yourself to be a student forever, because you have to constantly learn new theories, new methodologies, and different perspectives. So for me, doing research or being a scholar is simply a profession choice. I see education as a tunnel that we come through it, and we are channeled toward different directions. I mean, Alok, you went through your undergraduate and a master's level education. Then you decide to go for business in media, including podcasts and films. As to me, I just simply love learning, and I'm just curious about a lot of things. I enjoy reading a lot, and more importantly, writing is something that attracts my attention since I was a kid. So academia turns out to be one of the right places for me. Easy to say that, but making any career choice for me and for you involves lots of struggle and self-discovery. So it is not easy. So that is my answer to the second part of your question. In terms of why research is important, I mean, I'm a junior scholar. So for me, research can be really important for 2 reasons. Personally, research is to find your voice about the truth of the world. And take it broadly, research is a platform to communicate scientifically about what you have discovered to the rest of the world, with the hope that maybe this piece of knowledge can change the way people think and eventually inspire them to do something differently.
Yes, yes, yeah. I think that's very well put, and I agree that sometimes people think that, oh, research as a career option, or academia is simply like a way to sort of dodge working in real world, and people sort of use that as an excuse to not move ahead in their career or confront difficult problems that arise when you're looking for a job and things as such. But I'll give you a little example of how I saw research as to be like how it came to be seen in my perspective as a serious thing. Is that when I was back home in India and I was studying economics in my 11th grade and 12th grade. So that's called junior college in Mumbai, which is essentially just preparing you for grad school.
Oh,
Uh,
that's cool.
Sorry, undergrad, not grad. So 11th grade and 12th grade, which is still technically high school here. You are essentially considered as a junior college student in India, in Mumbai specifically. But in 11th and 12th standard, I studied something called the Porter's Five Forces model.
Mhm.
Okay. And that was something that I kept going back, even until I finished my grad school. And so you read about these things and you accept them as like facts, it's a generally accepted principles, and you just assume that it's true and correct. But when I saw the actual person like Michael Porter talking at Harvard Healthcare Conference in, I think, 2016, that's when I realized that, oh, this has been such a huge journey of, like, this person doing this research, putting this into his research paper, and it going on all these years to be finally accepted as one of the models to assess the industry, like the competitive forces in the industry. So it's a huge journey. It doesn't happen overnight. You're putting in so much of effort and resources behind it. And then when you uncover something that otherwise would not be a known thing, becomes
Mhm.
so obvious and so accepted that you don't question it after a point of time, right? And that's,
Exactly.
I understood that full circle. That's when I realized, oh, okay, research is important. Like, all the body of knowledge that is out there is the result of research that is conducted, and how the peer reviewed journals come into picture, and either validate or invalidate it for whatever reasons. So it's that. So no, I really respect people who work in research and academia, because they are adding more and more knowledge to the world, which helps us lead better lives and do better things.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. So it's that. Now, of course, you know, a quick look at your resume and it shows all the merit awards that you have won over the years. You have been a rock star student all your life. And so there's this notion, at least where I come from in India, is that, okay, only intelligent people can be researchers, or people who are academically strong, only they can pursue research. Do you think there is truth to that idea, or you think research is accessible for everyone?
Yeah, first, very nice of you saying that I'm a star student, even though I don't really think so yet, but that would be my best wishes. As you mentioned earlier, you have observed, you have a change of that perception that, oh, theories and frameworks can be popular overnight, but the more you understand academia, the more you know it's a really long process. So like journal publication academia can be a really really exhausting process. So scholars need conferences, workshops, and sometimes applications for research awards and grants as checkpoints to say if the research is right on track, and also just to use those checkpoints to motivate oneself to improve the manuscripts. So in that sense, academia is a career path for, I would say, curious and hardworking people, because research is like a marathon, and the feedback for scholars usually takes a long time. So keeping a daily motivation is a real challenge. Uh, I still believe people can be smart in a million different ways. But in my career path, persistence and self motivation are invaluable. So being a scholar is being a professional writer in another, if you put it another way. So writing is something not come naturally. It's a skill, takes practice, and takes time and patience to get better. So in that sense, that's what I'm thinking. Not just intelligent. You need to be committed into this career in the first place.
Yes, yes. And you rightly pointed out that being a researcher in a lot of ways is also being a writer, because
Yes.
some of the best research papers that I've read have that artistic quality of building a nice narrative, yet also not compromising on the statistics or the quantitative aspect of it, where the information that you need, the results
Mhm.
of the presentation of your results, is still intact, but at the same time you feel like you're reading a story rather than dry facts stitched together just for the purpose of saying that, hey, we did our research. And that takes time and practice. Of course, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, the idea of even just pursuing a PhD program is anywhere between 3 to 5 years, depending on what kind of
Yeah,
PhD it is.
exactly.
So that in itself is a huge commitment of time. So a person has to be really sure that can they commit that number of years to research and academia. And you might seem that okay, time flies and it goes away quickly, but
Mhm.
5 years is still 5 years. And so there are days when you feel like time is swinging by very quickly, and there are days when you feel like why does it take so long to get this thing done.
You're reading
uh,
my mind.
yeah, I've worked with a lot of researchers, and I see the amount of paperwork that they have to do. With the IRB or without IRB, even the grants and funding proposals that they have to write. I can see the frustration in their eyes that I'm a researcher. I'm supposed to do research and not write this interesting story of like, hey, research is like this and that, and you should support this. And but of course, I mean, that's just how it is. So we cannot do much about it. But yes, I think I see that it is a multitude of, like, it's a combination of a lot of skills that come together for research to be successful and make a difference. And so yeah, I think I believe intelligence is not only in terms of like how many merit awards you have or what is your GPA. It's also about how you are able to communicate and understand the interdependencies within a discipline, and then bring forth something that uh, you know uh, adds a new perspective to
Exactly.
people's thinking.
We always say research is a social enterprise that involves lots of human interaction. So we not just sit here, read papers and write about papers and handle experiments and methods. More importantly, is how you communicate your idea to the broader audience and trying to convince them, and you are able to write it clearly, then send to journals, and also have an impact on the society eventually. So it's really requires multiple skills, like you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you were a space tourism researcher at Middle Tennessee State University. What sparked your interest in this subject matter? Why space tourism?
Yes. So space tourism and commercialization is one label that I want to build as my scholarly identity. So I must say, I had a great time at the Middle Tennessee State University, and my PhD program was in human performance and mainly focused in leisure and tourism. Since I always have the dream of going to space, so when I brought up the idea of actually researching leisure behaviors of astronauts in the International Space Station, my advisor and all professors I know, they were super supportive. So I was lucky for that. And because space tourism has the components of space and tourism, so I got to present my work at the International Space Station annual conference, as well as the annual conference organized by the Travel and Tourism Association. And it just earlier this week, that tourism conference notified me that my work is voted as one of the top three paper for a research award. That is really that really makes me happy. And by the way, because of the research in space tourism, I came to the University of Pittsburgh for my second PhD program with the hope that I can support the commercialization of public space travel from the research perspective, so that one day I earn myself a ticket to go.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think there's been so much discussion about this space race. It's considered the new space race. Virgin Atlantic is trying to get into the space race. Richard Branson. Of course, here in the US, we have Elon Musk and Jeff
Jeff
Bezos trying
Bezos.
to outdo each other. And India is trying to, like, have its space program where it's cheaper to produce rockets. And hopefully that could, I guess, be something that we could partner with commercial space providers in future, where cheap rockets could be something that could be made reusable. And so that way there could be a scope for partnership. So the Mars rover that we launched, the prime minister claimed, and it's true, that we were able to make it cheaper than a high budget Hollywood film. And
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
Yeah, and so the entire global community lauded the efforts of Indian government to create a space vehicle that is still technically strong, but on a budget that is much cheaper than what it would take other countries to do. So yeah, that's what we did. But I think space tourism is going to be such an interesting topic to discuss in future. So that way you are ahead of the curve, that you already had the opportunity to think about the leadership behavior and what elements could come into play, because you know
Exactly.
we see like the legality of, like, if there is a crime that happens on a cruise, then the once you're outside the city limits, it's the international waters that you are in, and the
Yep, maritime
legalities.
law. That was
Yeah,
my undergraduate.
yeah. So similarly for space, like, okay, imagine if there is, like, a commercial space flight and a crime
Mhm.
happens, then, like, how do you determine? So that, I mean, that's the legal part of it, of course, but the more I think of it, the more aspects I uncover of, like, what makes it an interesting area of research. My question to you is, and it's a quick follow-up question. Jeff Bezos, of course, is going to space, right? So if you are offered a seat with Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos to go to the space, first, would you take it? And if yes, then what are the questions that you'll ask them? Like, just out of curiosity, you would have, like, what, 10 minutes with them in space. So what questions would you ask them?
Your question is like the same whenever I present my work. People always ask, so do you want to go? That's like the first thing I got asked. Then I told them because I wanted to go. That's why I did the research, right?
Yeah,
So I actually applied for the DRMO program, but I stopped at the step 3, I think. So I definitely want to go if there is a chance. I would abandon everything just to go. For that, if I'm earned a seat together with Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or both, then I think I would just bring research to space. At the same time, personally, that would be a great experience. Communication with those two will be happening after we return because I want to make full use of time being in space. And we're coming back, then you already build a personal relationship with these two guys. So then the conversation can go further beyond what you just have experienced in space. And then that would be a great business opportunity in the future for research as well. So
yeah.
10 minutes is not enough. There's going to be a lifelong bond there.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. If I am some, I would love to go to space as well. But if I am able to earn a seat next to one of these two gentlemen, then with Jeff Bezos, I'll ask him, like, hey, can I have free Prime membership for the rest of my life? So that's one. With Elon Musk, I'll ask him, like, hey, can I have access to, like,
Tesla.
free wireless charging? Like, I'll buy the car on my own. I just want free
Oh.
access to charging all my life. And so, yeah, these are the two things I'll ask them while we are in space, and then, of course, we can talk about serious things later on. But yeah, I'll just try to, like, negotiate and get some, like, deal out of it. Like, yeah, I'm paying like $200 million already, let's say, to have this time with you. You can do a little bit for me. uh,
Mhm.
so it's that. See, I went for, like, the material thing, and I just completely disregarded science and evolution of humanity, because I'm like, okay, what am I getting out of this thing? Okay. Now, okay, expanding on my previous question regarding your research in space tourism, what was the hypothesis of your research and the methodology that was employed by you?
So, research has generally 3 approaches: inductive, deductive, and abductive. Hypothesis testing is a typical way to conduct deductive research. So, in my current field, that is strategic management, hypothesis testing is really common. For example, one of my current manuscripts studies the relationship between open innovation and R&D performance, and I hypothesize that open innovation through strategic alliances will positively influence the R&D process from the experimentation stage, and I employed a moderation model in Stata with machine learning using Python and R. But for the work in space tourism, it is inductive. and I summarize existing work from this research topic. Then I collect data, analyze it using both traditional qualitative techniques and the computational based text analysis method. So what I did was like through data, I developed the implications to advance astronauts' experience seriously for developing space tourism, because astronauts are the population of real space travelers, and astronauts and space tourists have a lot more in common than we would normally realize. But for the research stream in space tourism, scholars would just go ask for normal people, say, okay, here's maybe what space could look like, and do you want to go? So for me, it's trying to add more science into that part to know what really space experience should be. So I think I think from that work, one of the findings would be space travel experience based on studying astronauts' experience is that it's dynamic and super positive, and the most important motivation would be the overview effect. And maybe the right title for space tourists in the future should be amateur astronaut.
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting designation to earn. And yeah, I didn't know there could be that much overlap between, astronauts and space tourists. So yeah, that's great. And that's such an important point that you raised, that, hypothesis testing could be deductive or inductive. In finance, like the background that I'm coming from, it could be both, but then the differentiation is like hardly ever spoken about or explained. Like usually you just try to, have a hypothesis that, okay, can we reach a certain threshold of sales, or can we save so much money by next quarter? And then you just do all the regression analysis and, all of
Mhm.
those things to see whether, if there is a relationship, and can that be changed in some manner to the outcome that we need. And yeah, I think, that's great that you were able to do two different kinds of hypothesis testing in your two different PhD programs. And so yeah, I think when you do step out in the real world with your research, then you would have the rare designation of having done both kind of them. So I think, yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I think uh, when it comes to space, people have this excitement, but there's also this risk factor of like, okay, what if something goes wrong? We manage to get things wrong here in day-to-day life. What if something goes wrong when we're in space? So that's always there. But I mean, as long as proper precautions are taken, people will always be inclined to give it a shot. So it's that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
one finding from the research actually deals with risk and danger, because a lot of existing space tourism articles actually talk about how we eliminate risks, how we manage danger. So I think the data from astronauts can be really helpful, because it tells us that they are human beings too. They just choose a profession that it can be a little bit different, and then they fully aware of those risks and not feeling panicked or feels like super dangerous that they don't even want to go. For them, is called like a self management about how you handling danger and risks. So that could be achieved by technology in one hand and training on the other hand. That's why I think space tourists could be called an amateur astronaut, because anybody who wants to go to space, not even go to space, when you go skydiving or any extreme activities, you require some level of training. So that is okay to do that. That's what I'm thinking. When you reach that high level, any person, based on the current law, like when you go about 50 miles or something, then you actually earn the title of astronaut. So in that sense, tourists are astronauts. They're just more amateur in that sense.
Yes, yes. Uh, so yeah, that's great. And so now, throughout your career, you have educated yourself on regular intervals on business concepts. Have you ever considered having your own startup?
Very good question, Alok. I am impressed that you actually read my mind. Yes. So the answer is yes. always have that thought in my head, but I only told this secret to my husband, Sam. So you are probably the second person to know this intention. Uh, for me, this startup definitely going to be about space. But the space industry has federal laws, so that restrict foreigners, so it can be really tricky to get involved. By the way, I'm a Mongolian minority with Chinese nationality, so considering the recent implicit space race between China and the US, so it will be really interesting. But my green card application is still under review. Probably after I get it, I may have some level of freedom to develop this startup idea. Here at Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, Pitt, we have the best entrepreneurship and competitive strategy scholars in my department. So for now, I just keep getting myself prepared.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is such an exciting area from a startup perspective, because there are so many things that you could do. That could support the industry and the growth. So, for example, you know, as we were talking about, the space passenger or space tourists being called amateur astronauts. You could have a startup that trains them before they go into space, right? Like you could be a company that has a facility that trains them of like how to be in the space, what kind of changes your body goes through. And of course that's going to happen because NASA and these companies on itself, they cannot handle so many people trying to go to the space. So let's say 20 years down the line, it could be something that, okay, there is a separate
Yeah,
center.
become a contractor to Virgin Galactic or SpaceX or Blue
Yeah,
Origin.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
that could happen.
if things don't work out with US or China when you're trying to work on your space startup, let me know. I'll try to put in a word with Indian Space Ministry, and maybe we can get you on board, and
That
have
would be
you
wonderful.
come on board and do innovations with India, and help India, stay ahead in that space game. So that would be fun. Plus, you'll get like all the amazing Indian food while you're there. So
Oh, yes. Makes me hungry already.
yeah, yeah. So
I love Indian food.
yeah, and I love Indian food as well, but I also love Chinese food. Actually, Chinese is like my go-to cuisine outside of Indian. So I just always am
It's
lookout.
funny for me. It's the opposite. I mean, except that when I get bored of Chinese food, I usually just go down to a street. There's a great Indian restaurant right here at Pitt. That's like always my favorite. Get lots of lamb with spicy sauce and
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's yeah. Indian food has a lot of variety. So whether you're a vegetarian or non-vegetarian, you'll find equal number of options.
and they both taste wonderful.
Yeah, maybe that could be your startup, supplying food for space tourists while they are on board, using some special vacuum technology that keeps it fresh, even in space. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing these ideas, but yeah, I think I could see that you are properly equipped to run a startup, any startup for that matter, because you have like a solid understanding of business principles, and it's only about like what industry you choose to apply them. And the
Exactly.
moment you do that, I think you'll be successful. So yeah, I'll keep my eyes peeled for whenever you come up with your $1 billion $1 trillion idea. And yeah, if there's any way I could help you, then I would love to be a part of it.
You
So
already have great ideas from you.
people don't know, like a lesser known fact about Jingning is that she actually wrote the script of the first short film I ever directed. And it's something that I still cherish, because when you're just starting out, you are very unsure whether this is for you or not. So that little help from you, I think, is the reason that I'm still working in media today, because it gave me the confidence that, okay, if I just ask for help and if I have good ideas, people will come along and support me in my endeavor. So thank you for that. So if I could be a media professional because of your help, then I'll make sure that you will be a successful entrepreneur because of my help. Not because
Aw.
of my help only, but I'll make sure everything that I could do to bring you closer to success. So it's that. Uh,
Mhm.
Now, you published a paper on iceberg business model. Can you shed some light on the idea and some key findings?
Yes, so it was a paper written in Chinese, actually published in a top journal in China. So the research idea was from my internship experience back in the 2013. I was a full-time intern as a business developer at Grundfos. That is a Danish company that is also the largest pump manufacturer in the world. So I was asked to visit several district cooling companies and deal with their business development. However, just whenever I draw their business model canvas, right? It's like a popular framework in business school now, the business model canvas. So I use that framework just to draw their models. Then they look exact the same with almost just the same with each other. However, the firm performance differed sharply. So I really wanted to figure it out. So that paper was theoretical and coming from this background. It actually suggests that the business model that we can map out easily is only the tip part of an iceberg, the same iceberg metaphor that we are all familiar with. So the majority part of that iceberg is hidden under the water, but it is the secret weapon of success in firm performance. So what is that under the water part? What I found is like it's the institutional influences, including like social culture, legal, cognitive, and other influences that shapes the coordination of a business model. By the way, back in that year, some friends actually did not recommend me to go for a PhD because in their eyes, I looked more business and entrepreneur driven than being nerdy or scholarly. But by now, I learned that you have to be an entrepreneur in order to do top research and publish in top journal. I'm not there yet, but that is my goal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I see that connection very clearly because you have to be able to present and you have to be able to talk and negotiate, and these are all business skills. These are all entrepreneur skills. At the same time, you have to tell a story. You have to do your research. So you also need that intelligence and that ability to see connections and communicating them. So yeah, you're sort of like a complete package in that sense that if you want to be an entrepreneur, you'll do justice to that as well. And if you want to be a researcher, you can use the skills of being an entrepreneur to become a better researcher. So I mean, you
Yeah, I'm. Yeah, I think I will be still deeply embedded in academia, but at the same time, since research is in the business domain, at some time maybe I can just brought that up and contribute to the space industry.
Yes, yes, for sure. And so yeah, I think that's great. And I agree now that I have my own business that there are so many things that are not out there in the public that influence the choices that you make in business and how many people you hire and what kind of work they do. And it represents it reflects your personality to the world in the sense that what are the values that you stand for and how do you go about approaching that. So it's more in the actions rather than like the PR communication that goes on. And so I firmly believe in that. So every time I post something that is not done by me, I make sure that the person gets credit. So even if they are an intern, they know that their work is recognized. And just because they are at a different level in hierarchy doesn't mean that their work is not appreciated or recognized. So it's that. And yes, that's
Mhm.
just one aspect. There are so many things. So I think the term iceberg business model is an apt name for the research that you did. So
Thank
yeah.
you. I need to bring that to the Western world, like translate.
Yeah, I think it will be very useful here because of course business model canvas is one thing to like see the bird's eye view of the different aspects of business, but then how do you model something that is very hard to see or very hard to put it quantitatively, for example the talent of the management team or the impact of weather on your sales, things like that. uh, so yeah, it's but it's one of those fascinating things that keeps me going. That okay, how much more can you uncover within your own business line? So that's great. So now, of course, I just spoke about, like, you writing the script of the first film that I ever directed. What got you interested in that endeavor? Because it must have seemed a bit odd, right? That there is this business group that we are both part of, and then there is a request for, like, someone saying that, hey, can somebody help me write a script for a film? So what got you interested in the project in the first place?
So I actually appreciate that you bring it up. Since you asked this question, if I look back, I probably think there will be two major reasons. The first consideration is like what you said about the creative writing, like creative endeavor. Up until now, I realized that being a scholar is being a professional writer. So back then, I didn't know. But I just naturally love opportunities to write about things, and writing has been my interest and a key skill to develop. And then just in my leisure time, I read a lot of books about writing, such as how to write in academic setting as well as in fiction and nonfiction. Another reason is you, Alok, because you have been a wonderful person professionally and personally. So working with you has always been fun. So I remember you posted that idea on the Facebook group of the Harvard Business School online. So when I saw that post, my instinct was like, "Hey, that is cool. Maybe I can try." And more importantly, when I reviewed my interests, you were really open about it. So I was and still am impressed by your effective execution of that film.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. And I mean, it just was such an interesting story that I always wanted to tell. It's about, like, a musician that is very acclaimed, but it's later discovered that he has been faking his deafness, and he used that as a way to get rich and popular, which is very, un-Japanese way of doing things, and so that's why everybody was
Yeah,
shocked. Uh, and so I wanted someone who sort of like understood not only the human aspect of it, but also the societal aspect of it. And I just felt that, okay, someone who comes from similar sensibilities or similar region would have, some more nuance to add to that. And yeah, it turned out to be much better than what I would have done on my own. So in that sense, it did save me a lot of embarrassment. But more importantly, it signaled to me that, I can always sort of discuss ideas with you, bounce off, things with you. So yeah, in that sense, this the film actually helped me build a lot of relationship with people in Japan. So when I was there, they were really happy that, hey, you being an Indian person decided to tell a Japanese story. And what's
uh,
even more interesting is that it was written by a Chinese person. So it's like the whole world came together to make that story happen. So yeah,
yeah,
it was.
international effort.
Yeah, it's like Asian, but it was written in the US and shot in the US. So it's like, yeah, it's a global effort that way. And I had a South Korean friend, and she was the photographer on set. That, okay, you shoot the scenes, I'll do behind the scenes. So that was fun as well. So yeah, I in that moment I felt almost invincible, in the sense that, okay, I want to make a film, and despite all the odds, I was able to get a script, I was able to get equipment, I was able to get actors, and I was able
Mhm.
to find people to work on set. Like, there was no set technically, but just people hanging around helping me. So it just gave me so much confidence that, if I choose to pursue my dreams, things will fall in place and people will come around to help me. And that has been the case even all these years later. Like, I have seen that to be true, no matter what is the scale of the project. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
totally hear you.
yeah, so I'm glad that, our paths crossed and you were able to come on board as part of that project. I have another interesting idea, but then we'll talk about that later on. But so it's that. But no, you've been like a great help and great support all throughout my career ever since we've known each other.
Thank you. And you are kind of doing the same thing for me. It's like the book's name. It's called From Zero to One. It's really the hardest. But once you like what you did, you actually directed a film. Then in the way afterwards, you actually have more confidence. And for me, I haven't really had publication as a top journal, but it's like getting there recently. But sometimes you just feel so much like I never done this before. Can I be able to handle that? Like doing this podcast is just like reaffirm my interest and a commitment into research. So you actually are helping me getting from that 0 to 1.
Of
So I
course,
appreciate the
yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, of course. And I remember I was supposed to publish an article with a professor that I worked with whom I actually wrote a case study at Harvard on the medical, like the healthcare tourism in
Mm-hmm.
India. Uh, but of course, that article didn't go through, and me and professor worked really hard on that. And it was supposed to be this joint co-authoring this nice article about the sort of the services industry in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is like I think more than 90% of economy is based on providing services. So what do they
Mm-hmm.
do then? Like if they can they go back to bringing in a bit more manufacturing as part of their GDP mix, or could they like also have farming and things like that associated? So it was an interesting exploration of like, okay, when the industry is so heavily like economy is so heavily dependent on just services, what happens when other countries start offering cheaper services and companies move there? Like how do Hong Kong still
Mm-hmm.
continue to maintain a certain level of GDP growth? So it was an exploration of that, and I just felt that okay, because the article didn't work out for whatever reason, then maybe it was not good enough on my part. But the
Yeah.
professor said it's not you, it's really like the way things were at the publication at that time, and it was a Chinese publication, South Morning South China Morning Post. That was the one that we were
Mm.
hoping to get published in, but didn't have. So I
Yeah.
understand how that feels. So, but no, you have every, you have all it needs, all that one needs to be published in top journal. So it's only a matter of time, and you'll get there.
Yeah. Only a matter of time. I will get
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So you're currently a researcher at University of Pittsburgh. What is the focus of your current research?
So the work in space tourism actually launched two important research passion. One is about the phenomenon in the space industry. We have talked about it. Another is actually language. So I used to love learning different languages, but now I'm more curious about language in philosophy and the linguistic theories. For example, the fancy text analysis and machine learning dealing with text have been really popular methods in the research field of management. Even I enrolled at the English department at the Carnegie Mellon University for a year just to get some training in natural language processing, not the computer science department. I'm so grateful for that because I was in the English department. So the more I learn, the more I realize that any text analysis technique has built in a set of assumptions embedded in some linguistic theories. But scholars like me or the majorities in management do not have any training in linguistics unless just apply that method. So we could easily interpret the results in the wrong way. And one linguistic theory is called Wolfing hypothesis, that is saying that language controls people's thoughts and how they behave. So if you have watched the sci-fi movie Arrival, that learning the alien language enables you gaining that alien superpower, that is a typical example of Wolfinism. Super attractive idea in popular culture, but the field of linguistics has abandoned that original form and moved beyond it. But as an outdated theory, scholars in my field, we don't know that. We could just very easily apply that theory in the wrong way and generate implications based on that, and it can be misleading and dangerous. So there are actually work doing about that. So my current work, in short, is actually called the language lens of a strategy, that is bringing linguistics to the management field.
Oh, that's great. And yes, I agree because I speak four languages. I only speak English as an international language that can be spoken in other parts of the world. But there are three other languages that I speak that are very local to India because they're regional
Mhm.
languages. And they're languages, not just the dialect. I mean, they are distinct languages. And so having lived through like, different parts of India and communicated with people in different languages, I 100% validate that the language influences your thoughts, and that has an eventual impact on what kind of actions you take. And so the way a lot of ancient Indian scriptures are written from that very neutral perspective, which is something that you don't think that back then people would have an awareness of. Like right now we understand that, okay, the languages and the words and the arrangement of them that you choose has an impact on how you understand and you do things.
So yeah, you are right. Like different languages have some impact on thoughts and how people behave. But this theory is about like it determines. It is like a causal relationship. But in
Oh,
linguistics, it's not that as in that strong form. We more accept like a weaker morphinism that okay, language has some relationship with how we think. But it's that theory is more about talking. Okay, we have different people. For example, the structure of a Chinese language is simpler than the English, and the English structure may be simpler than French. So French people could be the smartest because they have the most complicated structure. So that would be like over simplifying the relationship between language and thought. So it can be dangerous in one way because the public loves that idea. Okay, I speak something, you speak something different, so we are kind of different. That's what I love from the my favorite linguistic book. It says all different languages communicate one simple thing, one simple truth that is called humanity. Even though you speak English in different Indian language, I may speak Chinese and in another language. However, love is mutual. We can get hungry, we want food, and that kind of feeling experience and also are also shared. It's like a metaphor I always use is I may eat food with chopsticks, but my husband, he's American, so he's gonna eat using forks. So
yeah,
whatever tools we use doesn't really impact the fact that we just put food in our mouth, right?
yeah.
So that would be like my criticism toward using that theory in a stronger form.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, as you said that it's a popular mainstream idea to think that, okay, because there is a certain uh, structure to the language or the way people speak things, it sort of like gives them some sort of an edge. But yeah, ultimately it's all about like communication. It boils down to that idea. And within management, I
Mhm.
mean, yes, now I see that more prominently than before, especially because now my team is more remote, so they are in different parts of the world. So you have to sort of balance
Wow.
that communication even when you're speaking the same language. There was there was a funny incident, and this is more to do with the cultural norms rather than linguistics. But then I was talking to one of my interns in India, and she's this really young, energetic, outside of college graphic designer. And I was telling her that, hey, it's been so long that I haven't had a break, that I really want to go to India and have a break. And then I told her that, I feel like a lot of
Mhm.
my like a lot of life around me is slipping out of my hands because I now became an uncle. And she said that, oh no, stop saying that, no, that doesn't mean anything. I'm like, no, what do you mean? I mean, like, my cousin brother's wife gave birth to a baby child, so that's how I'm an uncle now, as part of
Yeah.
like the larger
Hmm.
extended family. And I asked her, what did you mean? Like, why did you say me that don't say that? She's like, oh no, I thought you were saying that you became an uncle because you recently turned 30. I'm like, no, it's that that has not got to do with anything,
Yeah.
like, so it's
Yeah.
it's
In some culture, that it really is true.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the theory I always say that we have a different culture, different languages, and just happen to divide up the life experience in a nuanced way. Like in East Asia culture, when you get a certain age, you automatically earn yourself as a uncle and aunt. But in some culture, you have to have that identity when you really have a niece or nephew, right? Not just because you are older. So that make you into somebody. So that's really interesting. That would be a great example, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm an uncle when it comes to Indian culture. But here, most people that I know that are my age are still like, hey man, I don't know what I want from my career. I don't know if I'll ever get married. And so it's that, like, it's, the way Indian culture and the US culture works is like two very separate things. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's that. But I'm like, no, I'm uncle because by the function of being an uncle and not by the function of being an age. So it was that. uh,
Funny,
now,
the meaning of uncle can be so different.
yeah, it's just like I was thinking uncle in a completely different context than what she was thinking, and it's the same word. So yeah, that's just fascinating to me. Uh, Now, of course, it's intense sorry, research is a very intensive process. How do you balance the demands of intensive research with other aspects of your life, considering that research can be a very consuming activity?
Oh yes, it really is consuming. But in my case, I want to be more committed to research. I told Sam several times that I really want to become a workaholic. I work 24/7 like a robot, but a lot of times I can be so lazy and unproductive. So gradually, I learned to take good care of myself, especially learning from Sam. But I do want to be more committed to the work. There are just so many cool things I want to explore in research. Um, but yeah, you were right. Research is consuming. It requires constant focus, and like I said before, it is a social enterprise. So it needs conversation with other scholars, and I love interacting with people, and that's a good part. I guess I just should practice patience and keep telling myself writing skill takes time to develop. Other than that, yes, I should keep good physical and mental health.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, yes, these skills are hard to develop, and writing, especially for me, as I could say, not to say that I'm some like gifted human being or as such, but uh, for me writing was sort of easy to pick up because I was able to understand the structure of like how the storytelling works, and then filling that with dialogues or those things became easier for me. So that's why screenwriting was easy for me, because I anyway had all these ideas in my head, and now I had a structure to
I see.
put them. Yeah, so that's how it became easier. So actually it was like when I was preparing for GMAT has a reading comprehension section, and you need like to understand
Mm-hmm.
the structure rather than the actual words that are being mentioned. So that was a strategy that was taught in that training, and I found that helps, that works equally well with screenplay. So it's that. But yeah, I'm still kind of trying to find my voice as I try more and more kind of narratives and more kind of subjects to deal with.
Me
Sometimes they're
too.
more technical, and sometimes they're more human, but you have to
Mhm.
balance both ends. So yeah, you are on the right track. I mean, if you're doing your second PhD, patience is not a problem with you. It's only just that there's so much of writing that can be done in so many different ways that it takes some time to build your style and your voice. So you'll be fine.
Mhm.
But yes, it can be a very consuming activity, and I've come very close to burning myself out trying to work long hours and trying to get things done today rather than tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's not healthy. So it's okay if you do it in short bursts, but in longer term it should be more paced out and more structured and more defined.
And we will get there. We will.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in your experience, have you ever had to deal with IRB, which is an institutional review board?
Yes, I only did IRB with the space tourism work involving astronauts, but I simply used tweets published by astronauts on Twitter. So my application was the exempted form, so it was relatively easy and approved quickly. For organizational behavior scholars, usually it's like my neighbor discipline that I know, they have to conduct in-person environments. So their procedures need to be checked and approved by RB. I love participating in all different kinds of experiments at both Pitt and Carnegie Mellon, just to help their research, but also just to learn how people handle experiments. Sometimes researchers will review their true intention of the experiment or tell me some of my biological or mental results. It was so cool.
Yeah, I think, because I was part of the IRB, and as a result of that, I had to meet with a lot of prospective researchers and PhD students to break them down the process of, like, what is the rather state regulations, academic policies, city regulations for doing human research, and yeah, for the most part, they would
Yes.
just feel a bit overwhelmed that, okay, there's so much of paperwork to do, there's so much of information to share in these forms. So exempt forms are like really easy because they're exempt from most
Mhm.
policies or restrictions that sort of apply. So that's what every researcher should aim for. But of course, sometimes that's not possible, especially when you're doing medical research or psychological research. Uh,
Oh, yes.
so it's that, and I would see this sort of like look of horror on their face that, okay, I have to share so much information, and we would say like, yeah, unfortunately. But my role was to sort of like help them break down and feel at ease when it comes to doing all those work, to
Mhm.
ensure that they get the paperwork out of it as soon as possible so that they can focus on research. And there are some people who really hate IRB for valid reasons and
Yeah,
invalid
that
reasons.
extra procedure only in the United States.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just complicated where people are doing research with multiple universities at the same time, and that's a whole another
Oh,
universe.
wow.
Yeah, so it's yeah. I've seen it all so far, but yeah, it's like IRB is like some it's a hurdle where it's just like it's sort of that necessary evil thing that, okay, you cannot move forward without it, but just get it done with. So it's that it serves a purpose, an important purpose, but for most researchers it's like a hindrance. But it's there, like it's required. um, Okay. So the last couple of questions. What's your approach towards funding? Is it usually through your department or faculty, or have you ever had to apply for external grants?
Yes, you're right. My research journey is supported by the university, and but yeah, I started to apply for external funding, the grants, different grants from different organizations later this year. Just think, yeah, not a bad idea. I would try.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, yes. Well, those proposals are going to be long and tricky. So, if you need help with them, then
Oh,
I
yes.
would be, more than happy to offer my perspective on them. But yeah, I think. Mostly researchers and faculty are able to fund a research, but sometimes other organizations like nonprofits or government bodies can sometimes come along and boost it.
Yeah.
So certainly can't see like anything wrong with that. So yeah, wishing you luck for that.
Thank you. I would need that.
Yes, and so now let's try to like bring it all together in the form that what would your advice be to people who are considering academia as a full-time career?
Um, Based on my experience, I would say two suggestions. First, that if like you have thought about academia, come join a PhD program and tried it out. If it is not a good fit, just drop it. There's no shame about it. It's better to take ownership of your thoughts and desires than feeling regret later in your life. And in fact, I always admire my friends who have left PhD programs halfway because they developed some sense of knowing who they are and they are actually brave enough to act. So that would be the first suggestion. The second advice is what I learned from a top female leader in the space industry. So she once told me that having a PhD allows her, as a woman, for voicing it out in the first place and gaining her space, gaining her space in a man dominant industry. So she would suggest all women just go get a PhD. With that title, life can be much more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we need more female representation on that level. So, not only a new way of thinking could be more widely accepted, but also the issues that are otherwise not given enough attention could also be explored. I've
Yeah.
worked with some female researchers when it came to, uh, doing research about, like, for example, if I'm writing a film about a female character, of course, I don't have the experience of, living through what a female typically does. And if it is more about understanding their mindset, I reach out to a researcher, uh, or who's working in that field, or a psychologist who has had extensive experience, and that sort of just, opens me up to the understanding of how things work. And the best part is that it's backed by data. Like, they could point you in so many directions
Mhm.
where you can then take that and turn that into the story you want to tell. So yes, I believe,
Yeah.
more female, would do more females would do more good to the overall research community. And yeah, I just hope that you become that stellar example of people, for people to look up and consider academia as a full-time career. So yes, it's also important to walk away and cut your losses when you know that it's not working out and you are just not enjoying the
Mhm.
process, and it feels more like punishment than fun. You should walk away from anything in life that feels that way. Doesn't have to be just career choice. But
Exactly.
yeah, so that's a very good advice. And yeah, I just want to thank you for, being so generous with your time and opening up about your experiences and your ideas and the work that you've been doing. And I just hope that in your current research you find more success, and you achieve everything that you wish to. So thank you so much.
And same to you. Thank you for having me.